What's up guys, today we're going to be doing a ranking and speed run of the best budget IEMs. We're going to cap it at around $50 or under $50. We got a lot today, so let's just get into it. Starting off with some newer stuff, we got the ZIIGAAT RUMBAs, and these are a base C all-rounder. They sound similar to the EW300, basically a mini version of them with less resolution, slightly less detail in the treble and texture, but they are going to be smoother, especially with the stock white tips. They're now going for around $35, so for that price, these are pretty good if you want a base C all-rounder, and I do recommend them. Then after those, we got the new TANCHJIM OLA 2s. These are a very good all-rounder, especially with the T500B tips. Makes the treble sound like a $100 IEM, smooth, refined, technical for the price, but also musically engaging enough and very balanced and versatile. These get a rec as well. Similarly, KEFINE's new budget, the LORIC, also gets a rec. These are a base C all-rounder. They're very similar to the True 2s and the Gate, but with a little bit more low-end impact, more quantity, slightly smoother in the vocals. It's a base C all-rounder similar to the RUMBAs and the VIVACE, but now a little bit more vocal texture, slightly more treble detail for around the same price or cheaper, which makes them pretty good when it comes to value. Then after those, we got the KIWIEARS CADENZA 2. These are a clean, balanced, good for vocals, instrument layering, very detailed. They can be a bit thin and tame in the low end. If you want more bass, these probably won't be the set for you. They do have a slight sharpness in the higher frequencies. It might just be my unit, but watch out for that. But aside from that, if you want a clean, more neutral leaning, very good technical IEM for around $40, these get a rec as well. Next, we got the KIWIEARS Chorus and the BELLE. So these are essentially the same IEM. The BELLE is just the chorus but without the open back vent. Basically no difference unless you, even if you A/B side by side, it's very hard to tell a difference. The chorus are slightly more airier, slightly more, a tiny bit more resolving, like I don't know, 1 to 2% better. So if you can get the chorus on sale, I would recommend them, but overall I would wait for the chorus to go on sale. The BELLE itself is very smooth, musical, bassy, warm leaning, all-rounder sound that is non-fatiguing and very good for male vocals, hip-hop, R&B, stuff like that. And I would give the BELLE's stock a rec. Then after those, we got the clean SVs, and these are going in the top tier when it comes to value. Not only do you get a lot of variety with the nozzles, but the technical performance is on par with the CADENZA 2, but just a little bit more balanced and smoother in the highest, well, at least my unit, depending on what you get. But overall, very versatile, clean, balanced tonality, good for vocals, good for layering instrumentals, and just very good for around $40, $35 on sale. Similarly, the TANGZU WANER 2 bass is a no-brainer. These go into top tier. Accessory wise, they're the best, under $20. And when it coy to the sound, it's a bass C all-rounder, good for vocals, good for the low ends and slam. If you want like a funner, smoother sound, these are very good with extension in the vocals and treble as well. Essentially a better version sound-wise and accessory-wise of the critical, 02s. So yeah, these go top tier, very easy rec. And after those, we got the newer KZ stuff that came out in the last, 1 to 3 years. You got the DUNUs, you got the Caster Pros, the bass editions, you got like all the other, VIVACE, you got the newer Zenith, Phantom, stuff like that. Those sound-wise are all pretty solid, especially for the price. Value-wise, that's hard to beat. They go on sale for like $5 to $10 sometimes. So they're also surprisingly smooth and well-tuned for the most part. The only area I will watch out for is the QC and longevity. And because of that, I'm probably going to put these at the bottom of rec. It doesn't quite get in the top tier because of the QC and KZ's history of just being like scummy and suspicious when it comes to quality and longevity and stuff like that. Similarly, the CCIEMs like the Polaris, you got the Trio, stuff like that, those are all tuned pretty good. Like KZ, they're the same company essentially, and QC wise, these are slightly better. Overall, I would put them around the same league. They are pretty good for value, pretty good for sound, variety wise pretty good as well. It's just that again, QC might be an issue because of the KZ brand and legacy. So CCA also goes into bottom rec, but slightly above KZ. Then as for the older KZ stuff, this is a hard pass. Not only are the QC absolutely horrible, the sound, the tuning also absolutely horrible as well. Do not get any of the older KZ stuff that are past like 3 years old. After those, we got the DUNU Titan X. These are going to the past tier. I mentioned this a lot. They have a huge gaping hole from 4 to 8K. Really hurts the vocals, clarity, extension, detail. The timbre feels wonky. It feels like hollowed, incomplete. And then the price wise, you can get better stuff for cheaper, like the TANGZU WANER 2 bass. It's a better version of this essentially, but for cheaper. So yeah, these are definitely a pass unless you can get them for under 20 bucks, which I highly doubt. These are a pass. Next, we got the TANGZU Xuetao. These are actually pretty solid sound wise. It's just the pricing is a bit high for a, you know, warmer, darker leaning, smoothed out IEM. The technicalities on these aren't, you know, $50 level like the ELUA Ultras, for example, clean, all better for cheaper. So if you can find these on sale for around 20, 25, I think they're still pretty solid. If you want like a smooth, warmer, darker leaning sound, scale is good, pretty quote unquote musical, accessories, build also pretty solid. It's just that the performance isn't at a $50 level. Next, we got these 7Hz Clinical Zero Bluetooths. These are pretty solid for a bass headset with the ohm adapter. Now, if you listen to these stock, they are going to be overly bright, artificial, you know, boosted, hot, shouty when it comes to the upper mids and treble. But as a bass head, these are essentially a mini HBB punch for $60. So for a bass head, I would recommend them. For a stock sound, I would probably pass because they are just too bright. Then after those, we got the TANCHJIM Zero Ultimas and the Bunny DSP/3.5. These two are going into top tier. They are very good when it comes to performance. The refinement in the treble, you know, pretty shocking for under $20. And the fit, the build on the Zero Ultimas bullet style, super comfy. DSP gives you a lot of EQ tuning variety, and it's also very affordable for around $20 or less on sale. So pretty no-brainer, goes to top tier. Then moving on, we got these 7Hz ELUA Ultra. These have a slight V-shaped sound. They are very technical for around $20. These are essentially a cheaper version of the Defiance, and overall when it comes to an engaging, dynamic, you know, detailed sound for the price, these go into top tier as well. Then after those, we got the KINERA Ignite X Beast. These are a vocal leaning upper mids focus set. They're pretty good for gaming because of the boost in the upper mids. They're clean, they're technical. They're not the best for like hip hop, low and heavy stuff like rock. They can be a bit shouty when it comes to that, but overall, if you want a technical set that's pretty good for female vocals or just gaming in general, these do still get a rec overall. And similarly, the EPZ QN Pros also get a rec. They have a similar sound to the Ignite X Beast, maybe a little bit smoother. They're also clean, vocal centric, very good for female vocals, good layering, good imaging, very clear, balanced sound, but again, could be lacking in the low end, could get shouty. But overall, for a technical, clean, vocal-centric listen, these do get a rec. But moving on, we got the TANCHJIM for you next. These are going into top tier depending on how steep the sell is. If you can get these for under 50, these go to top tier. If you get them for around 55, or like even 60, these go to rec. They are very smooth, natural, full, very refined in the treble for the price you're paying for. The build also pretty solid. Accessories, you know, you get the tuning nozzles as well. If you want a neutral leaning to like a more warmer all-rounder playback with good variety on top, these are pretty solid. Then after those, we got the MOONDROP LAN 2 Pop and Reference Edition. Now the Pop Reference is just a bass boosted version of the Reference version, as the name suggests. The Reference is a lot cleaner, a little bit more technical in the layering, but overall they're around the same. And accessory wise, build wise, they're pretty solid. It's just that for the price, I think they are a bit pricey, given you can get similar sound for around $30. So because of that, I'm gonna say wait to get these on sale. After those, we got the MOONDROP Marigold with the DSP mics. Now if you're using the mic a lot for calls, you know, for meetings, you're on the go, you're calling people a lot, I would say these are worth it because the mic quality is pretty good for the price, and the fit is also very comfy. It's a bullet style IEM. But if you're buying these for sound, they're kind of like smoothed out, you know, not that technical. They're slightly bassy, warm leaning. Like the sound itself is inoffensive, it's fine, but I would definitely probably wait for these to go on sale if you're buying for the sound. But MOONDROP aside, we got some EARACOUSTIC stuff, the SCAs, the SPAs, whatever it is, right? These are kind of overpriced. I would say probably wait for these to go on sale for around like 35. These are essentially just like a older V-shaped sound and not very refined. The accessories and build really carries these. If you want a pretty IEM for like, you know, under $50, these are pretty solid if it goes on sale. Then after those, we got the TANGZU WANER 2s. These are going into top tier like the WANER 2 bass. They're essentially just a cleaner version, less bass version of the WANER 2 bass. Similar accessories, different colorway, and the overall sound, it's a clean, balanced, you know, vocal, mid-range, smooth, you know, listen. It's not gonna wow you, but it does the job. And for the accessories you're getting, these are a no-brainer. And after those, we got some more TANGZU stuff. We got the TANGZU WANER Studios and the original TANGZU WANER. Now when it comes to overall value proposition, I think the WANER 2 slightly edge them out when it comes to accessories, tips, overall packaging. Sound wise, they're more or less the same, not a huge difference in performance boost or anything like that. The Studio is a even cleaner version of the WANER 2s and the original WANERs when it comes to the low end. If you want like a very neutral, smoother, monitor like listening, Studio would do the job for that. And if you want a more vocal centric version of the WANER 2s, that would be the original WANERs without the accessories and all. So because of that, I'm gonna say they're still good. I still recommend them, just that they're not top tier like the WANER 2s. And speaking of the Studios, the Harmonic Empire TAIWANJI is a higher volume version of those. They are slightly less resolving and detail overall. It's a higher scaling set. It doesn't sound too great if you don't give it enough juice. When it comes to detail, technical performance, overall texture, it's a step down compared to the Studios, WANER 2s, and the WANERs. It is more of a niche set, so I'm gonna put it in wait for sale, even though it is pretty affordable at around $15. I just don't think it's as competitive as something as the Studios or the WANER 2 when it comes to the overall performance and value for the dollar that you're paying for. Then after those, we got the TANGZU Yuxuanji. These are an airy, smooth, clean, balanced, laid back listen. They are very unique for the price. The build, the accessories is also pretty solid. Technical performance wise, I wouldn't say they're a value monster like the EW200, but they're still pretty solid, and you're mainly getting these for the airier and smoother treble presentation, which I do enjoy, and I think these are still pretty solid. I will still give these a rec. Next, we got the TRUTHEAR Gate, and these are a budget all-rounder that's versatile, that's natural enough, smooth enough, technical enough for around $15 on sale. They're not going to do anything amazing, they're not going to do anything bad, it just does the job. And for $20 to $15, these get a rec for a all-rounder set. Now moving on to some ARTTI stuff, we got the T10s. These are a classic. If you can get them for $50, I think these are still top tier. If you can get them for around 60, closer to 70, they still get a rec. These are a bright leaning all-rounder sound. They're very technical when it comes to the treble detail. Can be a bit sizzly and hot depending on some people, but overall when it comes to price to performance, these are a classic for a reason. Then after the T10s, we got some more ARTTI stuff. The R1, the R2, the R3. Main difference here is that the R1 is a more bassy all-rounder listen, more emphasized in the low end, the texture, smoothness. The R2 is more clean, balanced, also pretty smooth. And then the R1s are more of like a V-shaped listen, the least refined out of the bunch, but they're also the cheapest. All three of these are pretty solid for the value. I'm gonna say a rec for all three of them depending on your tonal preference. Then after those, we got the MOONDROP Chew 2. These are another all-rounder like the Gate, but they're essentially a slightly better version of them in the build and also the treble smoothness. So because of those reasons, I'm gonna put them slightly above the Gate in top tier. Next, we got the original MOONDROP LAN, and these are essentially a cheaper, better value and better tuned version in my opinion of the MOONDROP LAN 2s. Now performance wise, you can make the argument that the LAN 2, the reference version, is slightly better than the original LAN, but overall I'm gonna say these get a rec, whereas the LAN 2 goes in the sale. Then after those, we got the MOONDROP May DSP/3.5 version. Now stock retail wise, I think these are too expensive. If you can get them for around $50 or a little bit less than that, I think they're still pretty solid. Tuning wise, they're still pretty okay. It's just that no one's paying close to $80-$70 for these. And similarly, I would also wait for the MOONDROP Droplet and the ZIIGAAT to go on sale. Both of these are pretty decent in the tuning. It's just the pricing is a bit high, and the ZIIGAAT also has a bit of like a shouty presentation in the upper mids. Essentially the LAN, but with more energy when it comes to the upper mids and the vocals. Droplet on the other hand follows more of a diffuse feel kind of sound. It sounds pretty good. It's just that for like almost $50, I think it's a bit pushing it when it comes to the value. So okay for the sound, but I would get these on sale. Then after those, we got some FIIO stuff with the JD1s, the JD10s, you got the FD11s, JH13s. All of these are gonna have an all-rounder sound. Main difference is that the JD stuff slightly more V-shaped leaning with the FD, the JH, and for the price, they're not too expensive. Performance pretty solid. Tuning, I guess, like depending on which one you like, they're also okay. I'm gonna say probably at the bottom of rec, like value-wise, they're not bad. They're not amazing, right? But you know, they get a pass. However, unfortunately, I can't say the same thing for the KINERA Celeste Ru or Ray, Ryu, whatever you want to call it. These are very bad. They do scale really good. They're very warm, very dark, but the gaping hole in the upper mids, the treble, very dark, you know, in a bad way, and then the detail is completely gone. They didn't want to step on the toes of the other stuff, so they made it purposely like really bad performance wise. So yeah, I would pass on the Ru just like how I would pass on the Titan X. These are even worse sound wise than the Titan X, so yeah, I would not get these. But fortunately, KINERA does redeem itself with the WYVERN Abyss, the Remastered, the QING, the Pros, right? These are all very similar in the sound. Again, they're an all-rounder playback with some variants in the treble. Some have more, some have less. They're very pretty in the plating. Performance value wise, not as competitive, around $35, right? They're a bit expensive. You're paying a premium for the plating. They do look nice, but I'm gonna say probably wait for these to go on sale for closer to 25, maybe 20. I think they're more in line with the True 2 and stuff like that. But overall, sound wise, they're fine. The plating also very good. It's just that the pricing's a little bit tiny bit high. Moving on, we got the TRIPOWIN VIVACE, and these are very similar to the RUMBA, but just a bassier, less vocal-centric version of the RUMBAs. They're around the same price. I also recommend these. They're essentially similarly a mini version of the EW300, but smoother, less technical, you know, similar bassy all-rounder playback, good for around $30 or $25 on sale. And similarly, I would also recommend the KEFINE Clean OGs. I don't know if I want to put them in top tier with the SVs because they are less technical than the SVs, but I think sound-wise, if you want a smoother, I guess more like laid back, warmer, bassier, all-rounder listen, then the OGs offer that sound, whereas the cleans are more, you know, tame in the low end and overall a quote-unquote cleaner listen than the OGs. These also have the tuning nozzles if you want a slightly more V-shape, you know, better imaging and transients in the upper mids. Overall, these get a rec, probably the top of rec, but just slightly behind the clean SVs because of the technical performance. And now for those, we got the original KEFINE DELCIs. These are a bassy, warmer sound than the clean OGs. I'm gonna put these in the sale category because for a warmer sound, you can get cheaper stuff like the chorus, like the BELLE. You can even get the WANER 2 bass. There's not too much of a difference when it comes to performance and sound quality between those three. So for the price, I think they are slightly expensive for the current age. So they're still good, but just get these on sale. Next, we got some lecture stuff. We got the D02, we got the DZ4s, and then the collab, the E20s. I think all three of these are solid sound-wise. They're a bit expensive aside from the D02. The DZ4, they often go on sale for 50% off. If you want a clean, high-scaling, vocal-centric listen, these are pretty good on sale. Similarly, the E20s are very, I guess, like more neutral leaning, slightly bright leaning, pretty good for EQ. Like these are essentially a mini Deuce if you EQ them. And then as for the D02s, these are essentially a mini version of the DZ4s with slightly worse technical performance and bass texture overall, but for like less than half the price. So I would also probably recommend these if you can get from $20, $25. These are pretty solid. So all three of these, I would say get these on sale. Moving on, we got the very popular 7Hz Clinical 02s and the GK content. Now I'm grouping these two together because they're essentially the same IEM but just like repackaged with the plate design. The content is just a cheaper version of these 02s. They sound basically the same. QC wise, I have heard more horror stories with the content than the 02s, but when it comes to value, the content is just a lot better, so kind of evens it out. I'm gonna say probably a rec for the content, bottom rec because of the QC, and then for the 02s, since the content is essentially a better version of those, and then the WANER 2 bass is also essentially a better version of those, and the Duonics and stuff like that, I'm gonna say wait for the 02s to go on sale. Then moving on, we got some 10 hi-fi stuff, starting off the classic, the blue earbuds, the T2s. These are absolutely horrible tonal wise. I don't know how they got so hyped like back in the day. Like listening to it now, it just sounds like overly bright, peaky, bad in the timbre, unnatural. It's not a good IEM, and for the price, I think the newer ones are going for like close to $40-$50. However, there are other stuff like the T1S, the C1, C2, C3. These are all more Harman leaning, all-rounder kind of sound. They're pretty decent for the price. I don't think you can go wrong with getting an all-rounder, right? Overall, for the rest of the lineup, they're still pretty solid. I would still say like a bottom of rec, but for the T2, DLC, Evo, whatever, those are all horrible. I would highly pass on those. Next, we got some older EPZ stuff. We got the Q1s and the G10s. Both of these are pretty solid. I'm say bottom of rec for both of them. The Q1 has a rare like flat leaning kind of listen. Scale is pretty decent for like around $20 to $30. And then the G10 is essentially a slightly more sub-bass focused version of the Q1 Pros with a rebrand as a gaming IEM. Also mid-range and upper mids focus. Also pretty decent when it comes to technical performance. Then after those, we got some older KIWIEARS stuff. We got the original CADENZA, the DOLCI, and also the Fortezza. Now for the original CADENZA, these are still pretty solid. I would put them in rec. They are more of an all-rounder with good vocals, good bass texture, also looks very nice. Overall, as a package, they are still pretty competitive. They're essentially a more musical version of the CADENZA 2, less technical but better in the bass texture. And as for the DOLCI and the Fortezzas, the DOLCI is a V-shape IEM for under $20 with good technical performance. If you're okay with that more energetic listen, these are still pretty solid. I would give them a rec. The Fortezzas, on the other hand, are bright leaning. They're clean. They're very tame in the low end. You get a lot of technical performance for the price. Value wise, detail, it's very, very good. It's just that tonality can be a bit, too artificially bright, a bit hot, a bit sharp. I'm gonna say probably like wait for these to go on sale if you want to try a different sound, because they are very bright leaning, but they're also very technical. Next, we got some older TANCHJIM stuff. We got the TANCHJIM 1 DSP or 3.5 version. This is going to the rec tier. Sound tonality wise, the 1 is essentially a more fuller and more complete version of the Zero Ultimas and the Bunny. So I would still take the 1 over those two. Then as for the TANCHJIM Ola and the Ola Bass Edition, I would say probably wait for these two to go on sale, because the Olas are very good for vocals. They are very clean. The power, the clarity, the detail in the upper mids are very good. The original Olas can get a bit shouty because it just does not have any low end, but when it comes to mid-range vocal performance, these are still pretty solid. More of a niche IEM. So I'm gonna say wait for these to go on sale, and similarly I would also wait for the Ola Bass to go on sale, because these are essentially just an all-rounder with better, fancier plating, better packaging. They're essentially a better, packaged version of the True 2s, the Gate, and stuff like that. Value wise, obviously they are like almost double the price as the other stuff. Moving on, we got some CVJ stuff. These have a very unique quirky tuning in a bad way. They remind me of the earlier KZ and CCA stuff, and they have the anime plating, the Vivian, I think the Nico. Tuning wise, they're not very good. I would pass on these. If you like anime, get these on sale, but like I like anime, but I still wouldn't get this for the sound. It's just not very refined. Next, we got the KBA Rossfinch, and these are going to the rec tier if you want a bass head listen. Now for $20, I don't think you're gonna find anything better. Even the 02 with the ohm adapter is like, competing. Like the slam, the impact, the amount of bass that you get is not going to be matched. Huge amount of bass in your face kind of listen. If you're a bass head, these get a rec easily. Similarly, the ZIIGAAT Nuls also get a rec as an all-rounder. They're essentially a slightly more upper mids focused version of the Gates and the True 2s and the all-rounders at around $20. They follow the same formula of being a good, enjoyable all-rounder listen that is cheap and affordable. Then moving on, we got the Inawaken Dawn M's. These are a bassy, warm leaning low end focus set. They are very good in the bass texture, the slam, the vocals surprisingly still pop out, are still extended good enough. Very good for male vocals. The plating, build, and accessories are also very nice. These are essentially a slightly more improved version of the WANER 2 bass. I'd still recommend them even in stock, but if you can, obviously get them on sale. Personally, I would say bottom of rec or top of sale. Moving on, we got some older ZIIGAAT stuff. We got the EW100 and the EW200. Now, when it comes to being a clean vocal mid-range centric listen for $20 with good technical performance, you're not gonna beat the EW100P when it comes to vocal clarity. And because of that reason, I still think it's probably still one of the best when it comes to a budget vocal set, and it goes to top tier for me personally. On the other hand, the EW200 is still pretty solid. I wouldn't say it's top tier as it was like 3 years ago, because just a lot more IEMs that came out recently, like the ELUA Ultras, like the Clean SVs, even the Clean OGs. But when it comes to performance, the EW200 is still pretty solid. I would say if you want a bright leaning all-rounder sound with good imaging, with that slight, kind of sparkle in the end notes and the consonants, these still get a rec. Similarly, the older 700 Sonus still gets a rec if you want a cleaner, balanced sound with good technicalities, with good extension in vocals, treble, transients, layering, all very solid for under $50. These are still pretty good. But unfortunately, I can't say the same thing for the original Moondrop Chu and the original 7Hz Zeros. Now, even though these changed the game back in the day as what in budget, $20 set could do, it's just that in 2026, there are just so much better offerings in the $20 price range, like a lot of the KZ stuff, right? Obviously, you also got the Moondrop Chu 2, which is just a better version of the Chus. If you want something clean, you got the Q1 Pros, right? You got the WANER 2s, the WANERs are even better than that. So I would say probably a pass on these two, unfortunately, because they're just better offerings. And finally, for our last two IEMs, we got the Clinical TRUTHEAR Zero Reds and the original Blues. Now, when it comes to just pure value, I think there are just a lot of better stuff than the Reds. If you want a smooth, cleaner, kind of balanced listen, you got the original Cleans, you got the Clean SVs, you got the CADENZA 2, you got the Bunnies, right? The list goes on, right? So when it comes to value, I would say probably a skip, or if you can get these on sale for around $25, $30, I think they're still okay because of the ohm adapter. Then as for the original Zero Blues, these are actually better tuned stock than the Blue Zero 2s because they're just less bright, better balanced in the low end, less sharp, less boosted. It's easier on the ears for you if you want that like slightly V-shaped brighter leading sound. They also go on sale for around $35 to $40, so if you find them on sale, I would say still give these a shot. And lastly, I almost forgot about the KIWIEARS Clinical Singolos because these were just so bad. First of all, the driver, revolutionary crossover did not really work, and second, the pricing was just way overpriced. Nowadays for $35, these would be okay because they're essentially just the Reds, but with like an extra step and less drivers, right? So I don't know, if you can find these on sale for $35, maybe go for it, but even then they do seem a bit overpriced, so I'm gonna say probably a pass for these Singolos. But that aside, that is all for this speed run. I hope this was helpful. I hope you had fun. Let me know what your favorite budget IEM or pick is in 2026 as of now. But aside from that, I will see everyone in the next one, and thank you so much for watching.
Shout out to Mr. Dom Q, Zenu, B Urac, Walker Standard, User, Tsukasa, Guava Juice Bane, Polly J, Mr. Gorillas, CT Jack, Henry Claudia, Son of a Horse, 777 ZK, Obi, PM the Wizard, Treble Well Extended, Matt Herc, TR8107, Shwembak Lay, Addy, Michael, Trackstar, Raphael, Ori, Juniper, Ryan, Effinadim, Chemika, Raj, Gilbog, Ocean, BC Knight, AK131, MN Gelato, Unbalanced Armature, Vitor Ken, Turkog, Hakase, JRX, Samuel, John Simon, Archie, Sir Eisen, LL Here, JPLA, Blue Nerd, Firto, Watjo, Spinner, Sam Z, Raj, Yaboy, Etune, Grizzly, Leanne, Mark M, Circle, Francis, It's Mark, Hedgehogs, Nostov, Kuya Josh, Net Zero, Nern BMS, Urian, Benjamin, Hightech, Bizardo, Rim1, Mr. Roboto, Ace, GGG, Gaming, Twinkie, AST, and Young Mr. Thank you guys so much for the support.